But something you were just mentioning is with the floating tack, is that all the luff adjustments are obviously done with the Cunningham. But our Cunningham on our sails, and I think probably on those sails too, go through a grommet that's a couple inches up from the floating tack. Something that, you know, once we adjust our Cunningham, I have the bow guy, whoever do, you know, is take the slug, the floating tack slug, and push it down, and take like, you'll see how that you get kind of a crease or a crinkle between the Cunningham tension that you take up, and if you have a tight outhaul, you know, the foot tension. So I actually just aesthetically, and I think it makes, you know, the lower third of the sail look better if you physically go up and take that slug and push it down, and take the tension out.
That has an effect on your outhaul then as well.
Exactly.
I mean, that's where it's pulling.
Exactly.
So you want it down as.
Yeah. There's like, so you know what I'm talking about. You get that little funky scallop between the slug and the Cunningham tension. Take the slug and physically just push it down. And usually, you know, sometimes you might have to ease a little outhaul to get it down, but then once it's down, you can pull it back on. It squares itself.
Now, when you're raising the halyard, because of the floating tack, it allows the top of the main to even go above that black band. So, do you want it as high as you can, or do you take it to that black band?
Kind of. I mean, we have two people whale on it and get it as high as we can all the time. And just the way, I guess, our halyard, actually we have the same one, the way that our halyard's spliced on, it never gets above the band.
Anyway,
and it's exactly, and it's constantly slipping. So between every race, we put it back on. It's usually a two-person job. One person to hang on it, another person to take up the slack and tie the cleat. That's the project that we got going on. In terms of other stuff, just something that we were kind of touched on before, it's pretty key to make sure that all your sail controls are for the most part adjustable from the rail. So whether it's the jib Cunningham, the Cunningham itself, maybe you have a cam cleat with a swivel, but you got to make sure that the tail is long enough to get to a body on the rail so that in big breeze, when you're putting these sail controls on, you know, somebody doesn't have to leave the rail and you can keep, you know, maximum leverage out to weather. Trying to think other things. Something that we do with our twings when we're jibing is we put you know, like those little plastic balls that you put on halyards, so that they don't get, you know, sucked up through the thing. We tie knots in our twings and put balls on our twings so that our twin guy through the jibe can roll like this. So obviously you got to stay inside the shear line, but if you have something to roll against, you know, you're doing a massive roll jibe. It's a good way to roll, but also it gets effectively the twing on the new jibe. You know, it does, you know, 2 for 1, and then your trimmer can be the one to step to weather like this. You know, hopefully squirt the boat forward. And if you're in conditions where roll jibing's effective, you're going to come out super pull forward, really, you know, a hot angle because of the apparent. And a good rule of thumb for the trimmer when you're coming out of a jibe like that is to leave that new guy, you know, the clue of the new weather lead to the sail right on the headstay. Does that make sense to you guys?
Let that new guy way out so the sail can rotate. You're doing a roll jibe, are you talking about? Okay.
Big time. So obviously your angles are wider in light air and you're pulled forward. So that's actually, those I think are a lot more difficult than heavy air jibes, because heavy air jibes you can go almost DDW, right? It's just a matter of switching the pole. You're 180 true, 180 true, you're just walking the pole over, you know what I mean? Essentially in a J24. But in light air, you're really pulled forward, and that's when the spinnaker actually has to rotate the most through the jibe. So that's definitely a lot trickier for the trimmer. I mean, it's easier for the bow guy because there's less pressure on the sheets to switch the pole. But keeping the spinnaker full through the jibe, through, you know, the giant rotation, is a lot harder. And I think a general rule of thumb for the trimmer is that once you step to weather and come out and flatten, is to get that clue patch on your new weather side just on the headstay. And if anything, a little bit to leeward.
How tight do you pull the foot then? You don't try to flatten the sail, you try to keep it full, you just want to rotate the whole sail pan around. You don't want to flatten it.
What our trimmer does is our trimmer will actually take both the sheet and the guy in one hand and keep them the same. And we roll so hard that he goes to weather with one hand and pulls both sheets up with him and then switches back.
It gathers them right in that same spot.
Right.
It takes it right around.
Right. Because when you're over here and then you come to this side, what that's doing, you know, if you just keep them fixed in your hand, is trimming the lured one, the new lured one, and easing the new weather one. You know what I'm saying? So if it's at a fixed point, a fixed distance from the bow of the boat, and you like where that is, and you carry them like this to weather, to flatten, what you're doing is you're easing this one, allowing it to go out, and you're trimming this one, which is, you know, what you want to do for the new jibe. And then when you get to weather, you can see where your clue patch is relative to your head stay, and use that as like a starting off point. I'm trying to think other stuff. Do you use these for your halyards? Not really.
Not for the halyard.
Yeah, or for the guy.
Some heavy wind.
Yeah, in heavy air, we found out another thing we learned the hard way is that downwind we have our, you know, our tactician looking backwards for lane, for pressure, for everything, and in big breeze they got the guy. I mean, usually you cleat the guy in heavy air and you have just your spinnaker trimmer trimming the sheet, you know, pumping the sheet. But it's good to have your tactician or whoever's in here braced, ready to ease the guy. You know, because when you're broaching out, it's just smoky.
Do you still use your secondary winches, or are they
We don't have them. Nope. We
You have ratchet blocks just at the stanchion, or do you have it also in the back? I've read where sometimes they'll put a ratchet in the back as well.
Some people do that. We just have one ratchet block right here on a shackle with a spring
And then a
to get
strong
that
guy
feed.
handling the
Yep. And then when he can't get it anymore, it's usually you're so far pull back. You know what I mean? When the spinnaker trimmer can't do both, it's usually breezy enough that you're pulled back, and at that point you can cleat it. And you know, you have, like I said before, you have your tactician in here for like the holy cow, we're gonna freak out. Just last ditch effort, smoke it when you can. Something we like to do also is, so you have your spinnaker trimmer standing to weather in breeze, and a wave comes, right? Or a puff comes, and you want to pump, but it's really hard. There's a lot of load on the spinnaker sheet to actually pull it in to pump, right? So something we do is maybe keep it a little bit over trimmed, and you could do the same exact motion by, you know, what you're doing essentially when you pump is you're just fanning your leech, right? And that's what's squirting the boat forward. What you can do is you can just do a quick ease and a stop. So if you just ease 3 inches and stop, you're gonna get that same effective fan on the leech. And it doesn't involve, you know, pulling the sheet on, because you can't do that. No one can. It'd be like Superman, you know? So you just ease it real quick and stop, and you get this nice jolt on the leech, and that's what propels the boat down the wave. That's something you should try when we get some breeze, which it looked like we were gonna on the forecast in there. I'm trying to think whether or not, I think that's it. Do you, something you might want to experiment with is 2 handles, 2 winch handles in the back of the boat. I used to be, I used to carry it with me when I tacked. I don't know why, because someone told me that's what you do. And since then, we ended up one night, we just had 1 winch handle, and I was carrying it back and forth, and it fell overboard. So we didn't have another one on the boat.
2 winch handles and 2 holders?
2 winch handles and 2 holders. So that's the program that we switched to. Not just because of that, because everyone else told me that I was just, you know, doing it wrong the whole time. So that way, if you lose one, you got 2. But also, it's one less thing that you got to bring with you when you tack. Because I used to stand up, tack the boat with the tiller and the handle, come over, put it in. You know what I mean? And it's just one less thing you got to deal with. Because through the tack, I mean, hypothetically, you know, the Traveler probably does itself if you got one of the self-releasing cars, but you still got to pull it up when you get to the other side. Hypothetically, you're easing the backstay for the build, you're using the main sheet for the build, you know, you got a ton on, so it's just one less thing you got to deal with. So, just trying to think other stuff. think of anything else super crazy off the top of my head. We have magnetic cassette tape on all our shrouds as wind indicators. We don't have a Windex. Just because everyone else does. You know what I mean? It's a lot. I mean, it is windage at the top of the sail. It's just kind of a pain in the neck. And we use these mostly to tell where the wind's coming from. And we use other people's Windex. If we can't see their Windex and tell exactly where it's pointing, it's so far back they're probably not on our air. And if they're close enough to know, that it is, it's pointing right at our boat. So we just use theirs. Okay.
Every one of us removed our Windex.
So and also the angles get all cockeyed, all the time. Every time you step your rig, and we're traveling to so many regattas that the in and the out, it's never quite right on the angles anyway. So it's just like, what? It does the same thing as the cassette tape, and we have cassette tape on every single shroud. Our trimmer uses it a lot, and then also on the topping lift. To make sure that the pole and the kite are square to the breeze, stuff like that. And then we have another one actually here, up top, as high as we can get it, standing on here, for the guy in the companionway who's looking back. That's like his Windex anyway. Trying to think, does anyone have any specific questions?
How about mainsail trim on when you've got the spinnakers? How do you trim your mainsail? I've seen it. I've seen boats have it fairly far in, and some put it right out.
It's completely dependent upon the wind velocity and your angle to the wind. So if it's super breezy, we just let ours all the way out to the shrouds. And when it's really breezy, sometimes we can get into this mode where we heel the boat to weather, fully rotate the kite so that the whole thing's projected to weather and almost by the lee, and at that point we have it pegged to the shrouds, and we actually have our twin guy holding onto it, making sure that we don't auto-jibe. And then the converse, is when you really pull forward, right, your angle to the wind is going to be tighter. So you sit to leeward, going downwind, and you just hold the purchase, wherever it needs to be relative to the wind. So, out until it luffs and then right back in. I don't say it out, that's how I do it.
Well, in light conditions, sometimes I find that the boom kind of wanders. So I bring it in so it kind of settles down. Exactly. If I let it out, it kind of ambles around all up the damn shot. It's not doing any work.
Right. So it ends up being not over trimmed, but trimmed in further than you would think because your angle to the wind is so tight because it's so light. So I sit to leeward in light air, and I actually trim the main with this whole entire system, like this, in one hand.
Oh, I see.
And just like this. And you can sit here like this, park your tiller. That's another thing we should talk about, is downwind and light air. I leave the tiller pretty much completely straight with the extension parked on the deck, and you can do all of the movement, up and down. You listen to your trimmer, and your trimmer says, okay, we have some heading pressure, we can bear away. Like I said, our trimmer is 230 pounds, right? So him trimming like this, when he says bear away, he's almost talking to himself because he takes one step to weather and the boat bears away. Or, sometimes it takes a body that was previously on the cabin top to go out by the shrouds, and the boat bears away. And it's the same concept. If we're bearing away, I'll ease the main a little bit, and that'll help, but the whole time the tiller hasn't really moved. The trimmer's doing the moving of the boat, with his weight, and, I'm helping him out with the main, but, it's amazing how much you can do with the weight. And the rudder, obviously, everyone hears it, is a brake. It really is. You don't have to move it.
Do you have your tactician sitting on the boom?
What's that?
Tactician sitting on the boom?
No, we keep our tactician downwind right in the hole.
Do you ever hear anyone sitting on the boom?
No. Sitting on the boom, if you're sitting on the boom, you're probably hooking your leech, right? Is this in heavy air, light air, all air? In light air, if you have your tactician sitting on the boom, it's like pulling on the bang probably as hard as you can, and your leech is probably too hooked.
Light air with a lot of shot, right?
What's put a little bit of ang on, just so that what we say, like the motorboat weight comes, or if it's really choppy, we'll sail with a little bit more bang so the leech isn't constantly bouncing. But that's also something that you can control too with the sheet. The sheet controls your leech tension also. So when you're driving to Leeward and there's a motorboat wake, I pull down on the leech so that the leech doesn't bounce around. And then as you come up to speed, you can let a little bit of the tension off, twist off, and let the boat build back up to speed again. Any other questions?
Well, this is an older boat. It should be 4 feet 11.
Specific to actually, any position on the boat.
Just your mainsail outhaul trim. What's your range on your boat?
What is the
You know what? It actually depends on the set of sails that I'm using and how blown out they are.
Okay.
The more blown out they are, the deeper the foot is, the more outhaul you need, and it depends. Like Fleet 50 short courses, Thursday night. Sometimes downwind. We don't even use the outhaul.
Right.
You forget. All of a sudden, you forget about it. I don't care who you are. Everyone forgets to put their outhaul back on it, and the loss, going upwind when you turn that leeward mark and you round with a big bag is so much more than what you get if you just remember to take it off an inch at the top.
Right.
You know what I mean? So outhaul's not super key. It's just kind of just to the eye, just taking a look at it. Obviously, I'd say. I mean, I don't really. Are you talking play in terms of?
Yeah, in your guide, it was like it was a half inch,
a half inch here,
all the way back. Yeah, and then it's like a half inch to an inch.
Walks like a couple 3 inches, here. I'd say we probably go through 6 inches here, but that's probably. I'm trying to think. It's probably an inch and a half, only inch and a half. of play down there.
So you try to have it at the band, out at the band as close most of the time?
Once again, it's one of those things that's like completely velocity dependent.
Okay.
Nice and like I said, depending upon what sails we're using and how long they've been around. You know, if you got some blown out sails, you'd be more apt to, you know, you'd err on the side of more alcohol.
And then downwind, you pop it off and try to get the bag, or is that what you were saying? It didn't really
matter? Well, yeah, it matters. I mean, everything matters to a point. But, you know, when somebody takes it off on our boat, I look at them in the eye and I'm like, okay, you have to put that back on.
Remember, because that's important when you're going upwind, you better have it tight.
And it's one more thing, and then all of a sudden you look at the sail and you're like, wow, how do you expect us to go upwind now? Thanks for taking that off, you know what I mean? And then so then they get off the rail, and it's like, thanks for getting off the rail, you know what I mean? It's like, I told you, it's, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, but we always, it's funny because, you know, you do a lot of course fours, right? You go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. The last down, we're always like, now you can do whatever you want with the outhaul. Don't care, you know, we're not going back upwind again. So yeah, that's the outhaul. The outhaul's like the forgotten sail control.